All theology is nonsense. Those are the words I told my student who was in my office last year who was worried about his thesis presentation because he was talking about God, he was talking about theology, he was going to talk about chaos theory, and he was going to talk about death metal music. He said, "How do I know if I'm heretical or not?" And I tried to convince him not to worry so much as just to make a really good argument. That's what your thesis is supposed to be, just a good argument. He was not convinced. So I told him what my theology professor said to me and to our class one day. All theology is nonsense. Not that theology is ridiculous, right? Not that it is terrible or just made up things, but that theology, our attempt to understand God, our attempt to understand the divine, is feeble at best. It is limited. Even the best theologies we have are limited. Because once we think we know about God and who God is, then it will fall apart. Because God cannot be boxed in by a theology, even if it's good. John Wesley said if you could show him a worm that understood a human being, he would show you a human being that could understand God. So the student left my office somewhat satisfied and went and wrote his thesis, which was brilliant. His idea was, I'll tell you, it's not in the sermon. His idea was that God becomes wounded for us, even in creation, even in Jesus. And God gives up God's self to be wounded for us. And maybe our job is to love so strong enough that it will heal the wounds of God through death metal music. So when my student came to present at the presentation that day, he had on his slides up there, he put what he was going to talk about. And then the first slide that came up was, "All theology is nonsense, Reverend Dr. Robert Brewer." Great. My encouragement to him became a public statement that everybody at school saw. The minister, the chaplain, the religious leader is saying to everybody that theology is nonsense. That is not what I mean, but I do stick by the idea. Especially when we get into arguments about God, like we have the ability to know God fully. Really? It's nonsense. So here we are today on the most theological Sunday of the church year, Trinity Sunday, that tries to understand and define God in a theological manner in the Christian most convoluted way possible. And it might sound like a bunch of nonsense that I'm about to say, so just hang on. I mean, the early church argued and argued and argued about how God should be described in God's self. And even though they settled on this 3 in 1, 1 in 3, distinct but the same substance kind of description, it feels like this formula could become heretical at the drop of a letter. It's true. The church argued over the letter I. The letter I. They said, is Christ homoousion or homoiousion? Did you hear the difference? No, it doesn't matter. It's just an I. One of them, you'll be labeled a saint. The other, a heretic. It is so difficult sometimes. We get into these arguments about what we think God should be and who God is. It sounds a lot like a nonsense. But the church has tried to describe God as 3 in 1, 1 in 3 in lots of different ways, and they've tried to make it in ordinary ways, but even that's a little tricky. I mean, St. Patrick described the Trinity as a 3-leaf clover, 3 leaves, 1 leaf is still on the same leaf, but it's 3 leaves, it's still 1, but it's 3 in 1. St. Augustine described the Trinity as a triangle of love, God the lover, Christ the beloved, the Spirit that loves between them, all the same love, love is the same, it's God is 1, 1 in God, 1 in 3, 3 in 1. Hildegard of Bingen said that the Trinity is like radiant fire of 3 burning candle lights, but those 3 lights shine with one bright light. They're all the same, 1 and 3, 3 and 1. Even these descriptions hover on the edge of heresy, according to some. But really underneath all of these theological metaphors and mathematic equations is the reality of how the church understood God. Not just that they were trying to put God in a box, but they were trying to figure out how they experienced God. Because they experienced God in 3 ways: throughout the biblical text and throughout their lives. They understood God to be a creator, the God who is before all time, the God who is the parent of all things, the God who is the God beyond us, the God who is above and over us. They understood God to be this kind of creator, so beyond us, as in the Isaiah text we read, where Isaiah is in the temple, and the only part that Isaiah can see of God is the hem of his garment. God is so beyond what we can imagine. You can only see the edges. This is how people understood God as a creator, originator, a parent who loves as a creator and parent does. Some theologians say that the beginning of salvation was at creation because God created us to be loved. But we don't know just God as one who's beyond us, but we also understood God as one who became part of us. Love that created us became love that fashioned us. That love became one of us. That love became incarnate. That love put on flesh and lived among us, a child born among us. Isaiah says a child shall lead them, and this child grew and loved and shared in joy and pain and laughter. This God wanted to be part of us in every way, even to be hurt and wounded and to be killed, so that when we go through death, we know we go through it not alone. That God's not just up there beyond us, but God's with us, going through it with us. And when that love incarnate left us in person, that incarnate love left behind the love of the Spirit that was always sustaining him and breathed upon the disciples new life. That Spirit of God that was always there, even at the beginning of time. Jesus tells Nicodemus in the scripture today that God is this Holy Spirit that you can not see, but you can see where it's been. It's like the wind, he says. It's like the wind. You can see the wind, the Spirit moving where it's been. You can see the leaves move. You can see the kites fly. You can see the birds soar. You can breathe it in. You can spread your arms out and spin in circles and dance in the holiness of the Spirit around you. You can feel it. And you can see it where people's lives are changed, where new life comes. This is how people experienced God. As one who was a creator, as one who was incarnate, as one who was with them all the time. But they're not 3 separate entities. They're not 3 separate things. They are the full presence of God all at once, all 3 in 1, 1 in 3, all the same substance, yet distinct in how they're known. I probably should stop here because this is about as far as I can get with this Trinity before I get into trouble and someone calls me a heretic if you haven't already. I was wondering how this Trinity might make sense in our lives today. Like, who cares, right? What does it mean? I texted my friend Emily with this question. She's a minister, and I said, what does the Trinity mean? I was kind of desperate. And she sent back this. She said, the Trinity is the infrastructure of God. And that infrastructure, she says, is the relational heart of humanity. The infrastructure of God and the relational heart of humanity. Because God, in God's self, is love. And love is only known when it's shared. And that love is shared in God's own being, in relationship. That God is a community and only known in a way that love is shared among them all. And that love is the same love in every way, in every place, in every part. And that love is God's love for us and the world. And God is known as that relationship. And it is the very basis of who God is. And it's also the very basis of creation itself. That we're born and created to be in relationship with each other and all creation. I'm not a scientist, but I know some, and quantum physicists will tell you that all created matter is in constant relationship with each other. Even in the void of space, there are said to be fields of energy holding everything in relationship with each other. From galaxies to infinite space, to stars, to planets, life is interconnected to each other. An atomic scientist will tell you that even the very fabric of our lives is made up of relationship. The foundation of the world is community. There are subatomic particles called quarks. These quarks are the smallest particles of existence that create the basis of our being, of all created things. These quarks only exist in threes. Not one quark, but three, in relationship with each other, bound together to create the very world we live in, the very place we live in. Maybe that's the point of all this nonsense, if you ask me. That God is known in relationship, and that God, in God's own very being, is made of relationship, and God is a community of love itself, and so is all of God's world. And if we're made in God's image, then so are we. Desmond Tutu, my professor in seminary, was Archbishop of South Africa. May he rest in peace. He taught us the African concept of Ubuntu. Ubuntu means that my humanity is bound up and inextricably linked with yours. Ubuntu means that we're bound together, that I can't be fully human unless I recognize that you are fully human. Ubuntu is more than just, getting along. It's more than just community with each other. It's the foundation of how we live in this world. And it is our inability to see that we are so linked and connected together that continues to do us harm. It is our inability to see how we are needing each other that continues to do us harm. You can just see it in the war in Israel and Gaza. The inability to see each other as human beings causes war in Russia and Ukraine. It continues to cause violence and hate among our people in our streets. It continues to cause bigotry and racism and sexism to rise up in our politics. It causes us hate to rise up even in our churches. Our inability to see ourselves connected to each other and to see the humanity of each other continues to cause us harm. Ubuntu means that we must see that the dignity and worth of others is bound up with our own. It means that we want to be human ourselves. We have to see the humanity in others and see them as dignified people. Ubuntu means that we must see the homeless man on the street as our brother. Ubuntu means that we must see the trans kid as our sibling. Ubuntu means that we must see the stranger as our neighbor. Ubuntu means that we must see those we hate as those who need love. Ubuntu means that we must see our enemy as one who needs forgiveness. There is no us and them. No us and them. It's only us. It's only us. It's difficult, though, I know. It's difficult to live this Ubuntu. It's difficult to live in community. But this idea is what brought about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa. It is what brought about healing for generations of people. It is what brought about people being able to live together who could not live together before. Ubuntu is how we're created to be, is we're created to be in the image of God, and God is community of love, then we're created to be that too. Needing each other to make the world a better place. Making the church a better place. My friends, we must live into this idea. We must live into it, into our lives, into our community, into our church, so that the college student who comes here maybe one time or for a short time is just as much a part of our community as anyone else. So that the visitor who comes for the first time is a part of our community just as anybody else has been here for generations before. So that this disenfranchised, the wounded, the hurt, those who are lost are just as part of our community as anyone else. And even those we cannot stand must be seen as human beings in need of dignity and love, forgiveness and grace. If we want to make this world a better place, there is no us and them. It's only us. We're made for each other. I know it's messy and hard and difficult, and I know we don't always get it right. But it is only when we see our lives inextricably linked and bound to one another, and until we see our lives mirroring the love of God in God's own self, bound together in love that is both creative and sacrificial, always seeking new life, always seeking dignity and love, it is only then that the theology of this Trinity will make any sense to us at all.